Hi, welcome back to Guff Stuff Weekly Podcast. I'm Javen.
And I'm Guff.
Today we're going to be talking about
Anticipation's killing me.
game engines
Okay.
and complexity versus simplicity within tabletop RPGs.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Dear to my heart.
Yeah, so
Some
what
games I won't
is...
play just because they're hard.
Let's define what a game engine is then,
Yep.
I guess, in the broadest sense.
Yep.
This is a very non-technical definition, but there might be some technical lingo in there.
And I'll try to dumb it down for you if he gets too smart.
So, the most common one of all is probably the die 20 system. And that core mechanic of the die 20 system is you say you're going to do an action, you roll a die 20, and you try to beat a threshold.
Yep.
And that threshold
beat her. Yeah, whatever.
Yep.
Whether it's higher or lower.
And that threshold could be armor class.
Yep.
A lot of people forget armor class is a DC, a difficulty class, or a test that you have to beat.
Yeah, a lot of companies are using DC now as generic for solving all the answers, difficulty chests.
They still,
challenge.
they still say armor class as armor class, but armor class is a DC. It's a type of it.
Right.
And this is pretty common. This was essentially thought of back in 1974 with Gary Gygax and the tabletop community, tabletop RPG community.
Thank you.
Similar gaming. I'll talk about these a little bit, but it's not really RPGs. But it goes back to the early history.
Right.
Tabletop war games.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them have a game engine where you roll an aggregate pool of dice.
Right.
Usually one per model or character that's on the table, representing shooting a gun, stabbing with a sword, whatever. And you want to try to hit. Usually on die 6s, you want to try to hit like X value or above. So like a 5 or above. If you get a 5 or above, you take all of those dice and then you roll them again, and then you usually try to go through another threshold of like armor or strength and toughness, stuff like that.
Sounds like Warhammer.
Like a Warhammer. Warhammer's kind of one of the...
But it's a game engine anyway.
Yeah, it is a game engine. Some of the other game engines that are out there, one I've played with a lot and I really like is the Powered by the Apocalypse game engine. So
Is that
that's Apocalypse Worlds.
Right.
And that was made by D. Vincent Baker in the early 2010s or late 2000s, I think. It might be earlier than that. But what it is it's based off of the old Mongoose Traveler.
Oh, I didn't... Yeah.
It's loosely based on that.
Right.
And so the concept is you roll 2 die 6. If you get a 1 to a 6 total, you roll 2 die 6 plus applicable stats and skills.
Right.
If you get a 1 to 6, whatever you were trying to do, so like, again, this all comes back to say an action and then roll to see the outcome of that action.
Right.
In Apocalypse World, you say what action you're going to take, and then you roll 2 die 6. If you get a 1 to a 6, you didn't do what you were trying to do, and there's a repercussion that happens because of it.
Okay.
Usually something fairly negative, like taking damage, or it blows up, or whatever negative consequence the MC, the narrator, the DM, comes up with. On a 7 to 9, you do achieve what you wanted to achieve, but not necessarily to its full effect, and not without consequences.
Right.
Usually a complication, not a full-blown, like, you get shot and die, but, like, you get grazed by a bullet, or it's a lesser effect, a negative effect.
Right.
And then on a 10 plus, which is mathematically pretty difficult to get on a 2 die 6, it's very unlikely.
Yeah, well, you usually only got 3 numbers to do it, so...
Yeah. On a 10 plus, you achieve what you wanted perfectly, and there are no repercussions.
Okay. There's another system that does that, too. I'm trying to think of what it was, because I remember playing a game where there really was no failure. It was all narrative-based. And basically, like you said, the lower you roll, the worse the outcome, but you can still succeed even if you rolled the worst. But narratively, like, your goal was to catch the guy. Well, you caught the guy, but then you pushed the little kid out of the street.
Yeah, there's a negative
like,
consequence. Is that the end of the world?
It might have been the end of the world. That might be.
There's a series of RPGs called The End of the World where you
That
play
might be
as
what it was.
yourself or your friends.
Like, you never really fail at what you do. It's just a matter of how bad you do it or how good you do it.
Yeah, what the consequences are.
The consequences of that action.
One of the derivatives or secondary children of the Powered by the Apocalypse system is the Blades in the Dark system, the Forged in the Dark game engine. And this is one we've been playing with recently.
Right.
And this is a little bit modified version of the Powered by the Apocalypse and traditional war games. So you have X stats.
Right.
And you have points in each of these stats. And when you try to do something associated with the skill, you count up how many points you have, and you roll that many die sixes. If you get a 1 to a 3, it's a failure. If you get... This is on individual dice.
Right.
If you get a 4 to 5 on any dice, it's considered a partial success.
Okay.
If you get a 6 on any dice, it is considered a full success. All you need is 1 6
Okay.
out of the total dice pool that you roll. And you're rolling anywhere between 1 to 4 usually. And then if you get multiple 6s, you get critical effects.
Right. That's kind of handy.
Some other noteworthy ones are the Shadowrun system, which the core of that is a die 6,
Yeah.
rolling multiples, trying to hit a certain number of successes.
Yep. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of course, I played Shadowrun before I played Warhammer, but it reminds me of that system where you roll a lot of 6-siders, and say the guy has whatever his armor is. You have to roll X number of 6-siders plus your bonuses to get all those hits.
Yep.
Then they have a chance to avoid some of them. So.
And there's also glitches too, where if you roll X number of 1s,
Yep.
you can get a failure, a critical failure, essentially.
Yep.
Some of the other cool systems...
You can't go without saying Fantasy Flight systems because they're all...
Yeah, the Die 10 Fantasy Flight systems
they're
are
all
really
the
interesting.
specialty dice, all narrative.
Oh,
based.
you're talking the new Fantasy Flight.
Yeah, the new Fantasy
I'm thinking of the old Fantasy
No,
Flight.
I think the new engine is basically you have your dice, you have your success pool dice, and they're all basically it's similar to a D8 or D10s,
They're proprietary dice,
but they're
right?
very proprietary.
Okay.
And it's a very almost all the systems play very similar. They're a narrative driven system. You get a pools of dice, and then what you roll is based on the difficulty. So, when Legion, for instance, you roll red dice and black dice and white dice. Well, same thing with their RPGs.
With their Edge of the Empire.
Yeah, the
Force
Edge
of
of Empire,
Destiny,
and pretty much all their other systems they make, they have similar.
I believe they're all based on a game called Genesis.
I've sold that before, too.
I believe Genesis was like the progenitor of the special proprietary dice.
Right. I think their game engines are a little different than the rest of them. I know some of the guys in here, we played it, didn't like it because it was such a weird type system.
Okay.
And like most of the tabletops we play, we rely on dice rolls to kind of keep the game going. Well, in a narrative system, you have to rely on the people to keep the game going.
Yeah.
The DM really just is there to usher along the story.
And that's one of those things of you have to have a fairly experienced group of players.
Yeah.
And a fairly driven group of players.
Driven is probably even more important than experienced.
Yeah.
You can take a player that doesn't know anything, and as long as you can lead them the right way, it's fine.
Rapid fire for just a couple other ones before we go into complex games versus simple games. Modiphius does what's called the 2-die-20 system.
Okay.
You might want to look into this one yourself because I can't give you a good explanation. I just know that it's a 2-die-20 system. Basically, I don't know a whole lot about it.
I have
I've never delved
I've never read into it.
Savage Worlds has a different system as well. I can't remember exactly what it is.
I don't know either.
I think it's a die 20, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's a pretty simple system to learn.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a few people that really push that system a lot, and they really want me to try and play it because it's that easy.
The percentile or die 100 systems, that used to be the old Warhammer,
right?
Made by Fantasy Flight and I believe a couple other companies prior to Fantasy Flight. Made the Warhammer games or the Warhammer IP. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Warhammer IP was all percentage based.
So, if you had to pick a system, what kind of system would you want to play? Ideally.
It depends on if I'm playing or running.
Oh, okay. If you're playing.
If I'm playing, I really like the swinginess and the chaos of the die 20.
Yeah.
There's just so many options that can happen on a die 20.
And I think with a die 20, you don't need to have all your players knowing the system very well.
No, usually
you can literally have the guy that just sits there and rolls the 20s, or the guy who's really interactive, and it still plays out fairly well.
The thing I like about the die 20 system is it's pretty ubiquitous.
Right.
So if you learn the die 20 system, it unlocks more games than any other system.
Oh yeah, it's pretty popular for sure.
If I'm DMing, I actually really like the Apocalypse engine. I really like that it allows me to narrate the flow of the game.
Right.
Based on what they roll. It's not a yes or a no. It's a, well, yeah, but.
Right.
Or no, definitely, but.
Okay, that makes sense.
How about you?
I used to really like the D20 system. Go back to first edition to second ed to even fifth. Although I think now we played Stars Without Numbers, was it?
Yep.
That wasn't a D20 system.
That was a hybrid. That was a combat D20.
But there's a lot of narrative too.
A lot of narrative.
And I like that.
The skills were that 2-6 where you could interpret.
Right. And I like that. I think that for my level of, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting intolerable the older I get. I don't know. But I think that is a little more open to not just the dice roll. Like, I know there was times where we failed dice rolls and you narrated the dice rolls. We failed, but we're not dead.
Exactly.
And that, you can't really do. If you roll a 1 in D20 system, you're just 1. You can't hide that.
Yeah.
Or if something critically hits you and you're rolling it out in front of everybody, critical hit.
Yeah.
Like the little girl stabs you from behind the door.
Yeah.
And just critically you for like 60 damage.
Yeah,
like,
you're just down.
Nothing you can do about it. I mean, everybody's seen it. You can't narrate around it because that's just how the D20 system works.
Yep.
I kind of like the more flexible systems.
So the cool thing about the without number system is the combat is cut and dry.
Yep.
It is die 20, it is black and white. You succeed or you do not succeed.
Right.
But all the skills and the narrative portion of the game are that apocalypse traveler style where you can have varying degrees of success.
Yeah, I like that. I think I like that much better than I like the D20 systems. D20 systems I'm very familiar with, so it's okay. And I'll play it. Maybe second ed is a little different because there's a lot of D20 plus percentiles in a lot of that.
Yep.
There's a lot of percentile stuff in the second ed. So I don't know, man. I like hybrid, man.
Yeah, the hybrid
just helps out a lot. I think it gives more uniqueness to each character.
Leaves
my
it
opinion.
more open to interpretation.
Right.
Which ultimately, if you have a good DM and good players, is better.
Yeah, I mean, that's just my opinion. I can take it for what it's worth.
I think you would really like the Apocalypse World engine and the Blades in the Dark engine.
Yeah, I think I'd have to be pretty particular about who I was playing with. I've seen a lot of Apocalypse World, and
the setting is
Gamer Joe used to come in here and play Apocalypse World with people. Not old Gamer Joe, but one of the old Gamer Joes.
Yeah, one of the OG Gamer Joes.
And sometimes the players he was with, I was just like, that's just too chaotic for me.
Yeah.
It's just too much. But if you were DMing it, I think I'd probably tolerate it because I think you as a DM can help. You manage players fairly well, which is huge. That's a huge thing. As a DM, if you can manage players, that's so important to the fun for everybody. People don't even realize how important that is. When you're gaming, if you can manage players at the table, even the obnoxious ones, everybody has more fun.
Yeah.
The DM has more fun. Even the obnoxious players having more fun, even if he thinks he's not.
Yeah.
Because, believe it or not, in role-playing games, doing what you want is not really what you want. You really want to have rules and restrictions and controls because you want to have something to work towards.
Exactly. It makes the end game goal more
achievable. And as a good DM, you can do that in an open system like that.
So that's a good segue. So the next portion of this topic is going to be complex games versus simple games.
Yep.
There is a little bit of blending, definitely, within different games. But the traditional hardline complex games would be your advanced Dungeons and Dragons, expert Dungeons and Dragons. Any game where you need to refer to a table when you roll something is generally a good rule of thumb for whether or not it's an advanced game.
Yep.
I would also consider like Palladium games.
Yeah, the riffs and stuff. Yeah.
Shadowrun
Yeah, when you have 300 books for riffs and
Well,
you
and
still don't have them all,
and
like
the-
that you need.
the
Like,
amount of rules the game has too. Like if you have niche rules for dodging rocket missiles versus dodging gunfire, your game's probably going to be fairly complex.
yeah,
You also have simple games like Dungeon Crawl Classics.
yeah,
It looks complex when you look at it because there are a fair amount of rules,
right.
but it's usually fairly simple. It's either yes or no.
Right.
Other simple games like the Apocalypse World games are very simple.
Yep.
Great beginner games.
Don't need a lot of dice and a lot of everything up front to
In
play.
fact, the smaller the
of
rule book,
resources.
usually the simpler the game. It is a rough equation, but
Right. No, that's
generally
true. Yeah, that's true.
But the other thing too is to remember, like if you're trying to do a certain thing in a game, and the rules aren't there for it, you might be playing the wrong game.
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to, for example, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, let's say Second Edition, because you and I are familiar with that.
Yep.
If you want to make armor out of dragon hide, there really isn't rules for that.
No.
It's usually homebrewed.
Yeah.
So maybe you would be better served in a game that has better crafting rules.
Is there games that do that?
Something like Pathfinder has really good crafting
Oh yeah,
rules.
I suppose, yeah.
Other games that have pretty crunchy crafting rules would be like Ars Magica,
Oh,
where like you need specific animal parts to cast specific spells.
I think bigger title games should maybe delve into that. It's not for everybody.
Crafting greatly increases the complexity of a game.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And crafting rules greatly increase the complexity of the game. I tend to lean towards simpler games, so I don't really care too much for crafting and stuff like that. But that's just a personal preference of mine.
Well, yeah, it's downtime activity versus just gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, playing. And downtime sometimes is... We used to... When I played in second ed, we had a lot of downtime activity. But it's probably because we had so many people... Well, not so many people, but sometimes a group would split.
Yeah.
So you'd have... we'd just literally, hey, what are you going to do? Come up with an idea so by the time you come in next time to play... We can talk about your downtime activities and roll on it. And...
Yeah, what are you doing in this off time?
Right. Of course, in a system where you can't just rest overnight and heal in 8 hours, you need to have downtime. You don't have 110 hit points and you've lost 80 of them. It takes a long time to regenerate all that.
A game that does a good job of kind of landing in the middle between complex and difficult, or it's complex and simple, is 5th edition, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
It does a good job of having enough substance to it to achieve fairly complex goals.
Right.
But it's also simple enough that you can just show up and whack a goblin with a stick if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't argue there. It's a popular system, and it's been very popular.
And that's actually pretty true, that blending of complex and simple is fairly true for most of the Die 20 staple games. So your Pathfinders, your Dungeons and Dragons, the Kobold Press one, I'm sure is going to be something like that.
Yeah, they're using a lot of similarities of 5th ed open source stuff, and then they're going to add their own little flair. But yeah, it is. It's an interesting. I guess I don't know. I like simple, but I also like complex. So I don't know.
I tend to veer towards simple because my ultimate goal when I'm playing a game is to create social interactions, be it with story or whatever, that give enjoyment to my players.
Yeah.
If you're crafting, it's usually one person crafting and they're getting the enjoyment out of it.
Right.
I like everybody at the table to get the enjoyment if somebody says or does something.
Right. No, that's totally true. Because if you're playing an RPG, like when you leave and years later, your stories generally aren't about what you crafted. It's about game time and the hanging out with your friends.
Yeah, it's generally like what kind of monsters you slayed or that crazy thing you did that one time.
It's all about the hanging out with your friends and the experience of that than it is the small things.
Yep. But they are important in building characters and building a repertoire and arsenal and things like that. Like it has its place. I'm not saying crafting is bad.
No,
it's just never a focal point of what I'm doing.
Right. It's a good addition, but you don't need to make it a focal point. Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Easy enough. Are there any games that you would? We're talking easy against hard, right?
Yeah.
Now you said Fifth Ed's the middle game. What would if I was a new DM and I wanted to start playing? What game would you say stay away from until you've played 100 other games?
I would.
Or played some other system.
I would say stay away from any of the indie games from the 80s and 90s.
That's true.
Like Space Opera comes to mind.
Right.
That book is literally, the DM's guide for that book is almost all mathematical equations.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it is crazy. And tables.
You lost me at math. I'm done.
But try to stay away from games with a lot of tables.
Yeah.
The more tables you see that you have to reference.
Which is funny because you'd think that would be the easiest way because that means there's less research you have to do. Mm-hmm. But you still have to know these tables and what they're for.
And you have to you have to know the tables and how to reference them.
Yeah, if you have 100 tables, you have to reference them all.
Yeah, if someone rolls a dice and you need to reference a table, stay away from that game.
That's true.
If player rolls a dice and it leaves you with the less options that you're given when a player rolls a dice, the simpler the game.
Okay.
So a good example is Apocalypse World. It's half of the options are no, and something bad happens. 25% of the options are yes, but something kind of bad happens. And 25% of the options are yes, you succeed.
Okay.
It's very simple.
Pretty simple.
I think Apocalypse World is one of the best starting games. It is definitely not for kids. It is not a...
No, if you pick a super simple game that everybody can learn, Fifth Ed is by far the entry-level RPG, in my opinion.
I think the Goodman Games Dungeon Crawl Classics are also a very good entry point. There is tables you have to reference, but it's very simple.
The only thing I would say against that is, just from listening to you guys, is that you make up all these characters just to have 3/4 of them die. Mm-hmm. And to me, at least from what my experience is, new players don't like their characters dying.
See, I drill that into my players right away.
Right, I know, but that's Fifth Ed pretty much protects you from
It's pretty hard to die.
It pretty much protects you from that.
Yep.
And so I think that maybe an experience, if you want to get into gaming, Fifth Ed's the easiest way to get into it. But if you want to get into being a DM and a gamer, into that gaming, maybe Dungeon Crawl Classics is the best way to start.
Yeah. It's definitely not the definitive place to start.
No, but it's cheap too, because the cost for book compared to all the other systems out there is ridiculous.
Oh, and Stars Without Number is another. And any of the Without Number series.
Yeah, the Stars,
Worlds, and Cities Without Number. That is actually probably my go-to. Yes, play this if you want, because it has the sci-fi, it has the fantasy, and it has the modern. Yeah, it has the three biggest ones.
Actually, I think we should do that again.
And
the whole encapsulating system of all
it'd be fun.
Three together.
But the Without Number systems, you can get them free from Sign Nominate Publishing.
Yeah.
They're at Drive-Thru RPG. You can get all the core books for free, I believe. At least Stars Without Numbers is free.
Yeah, I think the other ones too, but I donate a few bucks. The guys made a good system.
Yep. I changed my answer to the Without Number system because it gives a good blend of the complex and simple.
And it's casual. You feel casual when you're playing. When I was playing, I didn't feel like, oh god, I need to know all the rules to play this game.
You need to know very little.
In fact, I know there was one guy that was playing Gamer Joe. He was trying to get into all the rules, and you don't need to. Just shut up.
Yep.
Just play the game. You don't need to know all the ugly, deep, dark rules to min-max. There's no min-maxing.
Yeah, there's very little min-maxing.
Sure, a little bit, but there's
definitely broken combos and things you can do, but they're not game breaking.
Right.
None of them are game breaking.
Right.
So yeah, basically, all in all, is the general takeaway is the lesser tables and the more interpretation you get when you roll a dice.
Right.
I feel makes the game simpler.
I can't argue there. That sounds good.
There is something nice to be said in simplicity about you roll a dice and this is the outcome.
Right.
So there is that. But
yeah, you'll find though that no matter who you are, I shouldn't say no matter, but almost any player that comes in, almost everybody that I know started on D&D 5th Ed, at least the guys who come in the store now.
Yep.
But they've definitely branched out the other ones and find that 5th Ed's not even really on the radar right now as far as systems they want to play.
Yeah, 5th Ed isn't even remotely.
Like, maybe somebody wants to do a 5th Ed campaign because they have tons of books on it and they have a bunch of stuff they want to do in it. That's fine. But really, most players are looking at all the other systems now and going, I want to try some of that. I want to try Cyberpunk. I want to try Dragon Age. I want to try this. I want to try that.
The only thing that gets me excited about 5th edition is when a module that references something that I'm really interested in D&D lore comes out.
It's like Planescape.
Tomb of Annihilation.
Dragon, Giants.
Yeah, Dragon Heist, all that fun stuff.
The Giant one's coming out soon.
It is out.
Is it? Okay.
It's out now. Basically, like, if what they're pumping out is a really cool setting and really interesting to me,
good lore.
Then I'll look at it.
Yeah, it's good. I like good lore. I can deal with that all day long. That I have found that is some of the problem with some of the smaller games, like you said, indie games.
Yeah.
They put out a book or maybe a couple books, but they don't have. There's no lore to it. Like there's no histories. There's just a little tiny snippet in their book.
Yeah. And
you got to kind of make that up. And that's a trouble for a lot of new GMs and new players. You move to 5th Ed, you move to Pathfinder, you move to some of the bigger scissor riffs. You have hundreds upon thousands of books to choose from.
That's the cool thing about both Apocalypse World and the.
You create the lore, your goal.
The players are in charge of creating the lore.
Right.
When you sit down at the first session, you ask the players. There's a list of questions you ask them.
Yeah.
And from that, it determines your world.
It's pretty cool.
The signed nominated publishing stuff's really good for that too. Like Stars Without Number has this is what happened to get you to where you are now.
Right.
This is the present day, and then you generate your sectors by either using the book or using a sector generator, and then you can create all the lore for the world.
Sector generator, Jesus. Anyway,
yeah, we're dragging on now.
No, this is good stuff though. Anyway, yeah, I suppose that covers some of that. Maybe we'll get into some deeper stuff, into more of the deep stuff of, say, Stars Without Numbers, Apocalypse, Blades.
Yeah, we can do a deep dive in some of these games.
Because I think that's good stuff, and I think that, for people who are listening, they're like, maybe they've never even heard of some of this stuff before.
Yeah. We definitely reference Stars quite a bit. It's probably our most referenced game.
Well, it's because I think that it's been a long time since I played a game that was so easy to learn, but yet was complex enough that it was fun.
Yeah. And
the different classes and characters were... And I think we made a podcast with Stars before.
We did,
but I think we could do a little more in-depth, a little more details.
Oh, yeah, we could definitely do a deeper dive into it.
And then even look at the other two parts of the system they have. Anyway, I suppose that'll be good for this week.
Yep, keep your eyes and ears out. Next week we have a special guest. We're going to be talking about a video game that is out.
Yeah, you should also, anybody that's still listening, keep track. Go to Facebook, Guff Stuff Facebook, and we're going to start putting these podcasts on YouTube also once we hit 50 podcasts. So, but there's a lot of lore I'm putting up on Facebook right now. I'm doing scheduled posts every day about histories. I think we went through Monopoly, Pokemon, and we're doing basic, but if there's enough interest, we're going to do deeper lore. Like, talk about Magic and how it was released and who released it back in the early 90s. But it'd be nice to go even deeper into the whole lore of it. And so we're going to do that by podcasts, by videos, and by posts, and just kind of drive more. So this is the first time I think I've mentioned anything on anything else that we've done.
Yeah.
But I want to get it all intertwined because once we hit 50 podcasts, we're going to start pushing all this together. So anyway, until next time, like you said, Javen said, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, pay attention to what's going on around you. Until next time.